Hey guys, how you going? Hope you're all doing very well. This afternoon I'm going to be doing another movie review, so hopefully you find this one interesting. This movie is a horror film from the UK, English language, released in the year 2011, directed by Sean Hogan, Andrew Parkinson and Simon Rumley, and this film is called Little Deaths. So Little Deaths is a horror anthology that consists of 3 stories that have the similarity of sexuality. So sexuality in relationships and how these relationships can have pressure on these people and cause them to do things that they might not necessarily do if they were thinking in a very clear state. So the first story consists of a couple. They are very rich, but they have a lot of problems, and their sexuality is actually quite dangerous. And so what they like doing in order to quench their thirst for sexuality is kidnap homeless women and subject them to all kinds of sexual degradation. But unfortunately, the woman that they pick on this particular day is unlike anyone they've ever met. The second story is about this woman who has basically a recovering drug addict, and she has medication that she's just gone on. It's very new. The doctor is very peculiar, but he says that these drugs will actually make her feel a lot better. But then she starts having these side effects that she's actually quite concerned about, because she's starting to have a dream about someone who's locked up. And so she starts to suspect that there is a lot more reality to this dream than she first thought, and it all boils down into something that's a very, very bizarre set of circumstances. And the last story is about this woman who treats her boyfriend really, really badly, and the boyfriend has finally had enough, and he's going to do something that he really has to be seen to be believed. So all these 3 stories, as I said, combined with relationships and sexuality, and how each and every one of these unfolds is something you're going to have to find out for yourself, because that's as far as I'm going with my synopsis. Now, my thoughts on Little Deaths. I'm a massive fan of horror anthologies, and I think that the main problem with a lot of horror anthologies is that these stories don't really connect to make an overall piece. And when you've got a really good horror anthology, case in point, Trick or Treat, and also Southbound, when all these stories combine together, it actually feels like it's a complete film, as that it's one big movie told through different perspectives. And so I think that when a horror anthology really nails it, it actually gets that style. It actually gets that sense that, okay, this is not separate stories, this is just one big story. So I think that that's the reason why a lot of these films succeed, but unfortunately a lot of those movies fall down short when you actually feel like you're just watching short films. And I will say that Little Deaths does have that problem, is that it doesn't really combine to make an overall piece. It's really just a story that is connected to each other, 3 stories connected to each other through sexuality, and that sexuality doesn't really combine it to make an overall piece. It just makes it, 3 different stories that have the same sort of subject. And so for that reason, it does have sort of a connection with these 3, but it's not a connection in the way that I really like. So that's the biggest problem I had with Little Deaths. But I will say that if you are a fan of extreme cinema, this is definitely one to check out, is because it has some very, very shocking scenes that I didn't really expect. And so when you actually get hit with something you're not expecting, I have to give it credit. It's because extreme films, they are few and far between, and when they're actually made well, they can actually have that effect on you. And I think Little Deaths really had that effect on me. It is about sexuality. There is a lot of sexual violence in this film. There's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of full frontal nudity. So it is very offensive, and it's done in a way that it wasn't overdone. It wasn't done to a point where I thought it was just that kid in the classroom is trying to make as much noise as possible saying, look at me. I thought there was a certain level of maturity to this film, because it is a movie, once again, it is a horror film, but it's also a movie that actually tells the story of relationships and how relationships can be really put under the test. And in these situations, they are very, very extreme, but I thought underneath it actually had that soul-searching message, whether it's a couple who are trying to spice up their love life because they're getting bored with each other, or a couple where someone is treating the other one really, really badly, or another one where a person wants to recover from previous horrors in their life. And so although it is exaggerated to a point where it's a full-on extreme horror film, I still thought there was a maturity in this movie that actually prevents it from going too far over the top. And that's something I really liked. I would say this is an extremely disturbing experience. The cinematography is very well done. It's a lower budget movie, but I thought the acting was very good, and the violence was few and far between. And when the violence actually hits you, it's not gratuitous violence, and so it's not basically relying on the very cheap tricks. It's actually relying on its atmosphere. Now I thought the atmosphere soaks through very, very well. And so you've got some moments that I thought were quite funny as well, and so there are some moments that are extremely bizarre. So if you like your really bizarre quality, I definitely think Little Deaths is a movie for you. So it is a very provocative film, and the reason why it is provocative and it does give that impact is that it's not trying too hard. It's not actually being a lazy film. It's not a movie that's trying to just hit you with jump scares or excessive of gore or nudity. This is a movie that does have the extreme nature, but I thought that the overall message and the themes of the film of sexuality and relationships actually grounds it to a level where I thought that it was, I wouldn't say it was entertaining, I wouldn't say it's an enjoyable experience, but it's an experience that every extreme horror fan wants. And so the 3 stories only go for about 30 minutes, so it's a 90-minute feature. And I thought, okay, well, the stories don't go for too long, and I thought they really tied up their loose ends very well. So I thought that neither any of these stories really had the potential to go on to make a feature film, and that's something I really like. A lot of these horror anthologies, they have really good stories, but I feel as though they're feature films trapped inside a short film. And so that is a curse, is because you want to know more. You want that particular story to actually develop further. But in this movie, I thought each of these stories were done in a way where I actually thought that they were short stories. And I thought they were really well done, and I thought the idea and the execution was actually quite impressive for a film of this nature. I really wasn't expecting that. But as I said, the only problem I have with the film is that they don't really connect very well with each other. I thought, okay, the themes of sexuality makes these movies, these stories have something in common, but the overall piece, I didn't think it was one whole film told through different perspectives. I thought it was just 3 stories told under the banner of sexuality. And so that's the only problem I have with the horror anthology aspect. But overall, it's a very, it's a movie I would highly recommend if you are a fan of extreme cinema. There is a little bit of humour in there, there's some shocking scenes, and there's also a little bit to think about as well. So overall, this is definitely not a bad film. It was a lot better than I actually expected, and as a result of that, I'm going to give Little Deaths 3.5 stars. Alright guys, that's it for my review. Hope you enjoyed it. Till next time, keep watching movies, and I'll see you later. Bye.